So hopefully you've seen the title of my sermon, To Complain is Human, to Delegate Divine. It's funny. I'm talking about that today because in two of the main readings today, the Numbers reading and the reading from the Gospel of Mark, there's a lot of human complaining going on. And in both cases, the divine figure answers not by necessarily granting what the person asked for, but by delegating. If you take a look at the reading from Numbers, there are actually 3 complaints being made. Now, the rabble are rabble-rousers who were not part of the Israelites, but as the Israelites were journeying through the desert for however many years they did that, other people were hangers-on. And they stirred up the Israelites who'd been getting manna falling from heaven for the whole time in the desert. And remember, manna was like a little coriander seed that would fall every day, and they would scrape it up and cook it and make it into cakes and eat it, and it tasted sweet like honey. And it provided apparently perfect nutrition. Maybe it's quinoa with sugar. But they were not happy about this, and so they wept loudly. That was the first complaint. And it doesn't show it in the reading. It doesn't show it in the Numbers reading, but actually God says in response to that, fine, I will give them all the meat they want, not for a week, not for a month, but for months on end. I will throw quail from the heavens every night until they're sick of meat. That is God's response. But we don't see that today. They cut that out of there. So instead, they focus on Moses' complaint. So Moses said, why have you left me for the miserable, griping people? I never wanted to do this job. I'm tired of it. I want to die now so I don't have to be miserable anymore. Get me out of here. And God responds by delegating. Does he say, I'm sorry, Moses, I can see you're exhausted and you poor guy? No. God's mercy and pity is expressed in his saying, you go find 70 leaders. Now, God doesn't go find them. He says, go find 70 leaders to help bear this horrible burden with you. So God, in a way, commiserates, understands the problem is you are overworked, and let's get you some help. You go get yourself some help. The third complaint, this is a complaining people, is that after Moses goes and gets those 70 servants and they go into the tent and they prophesy, 2 others, Eldad and Medad, who missed the trolley ride, stayed in the camp. They also have the Spirit fall upon them and they prophesy in the camp. And some young man says to Joshua, hey, they're prophesying in the camp. And Joshua says, wait, they aren't ordained. They can't do that. And he runs over to Moses and says, stop them. And Moses said, you're so jealous. Why would I stop people who are finally doing the work that I have been doing alone for so long? They were worried about maintaining their place, maintaining their egos, maintaining their special place. Notice that it said Joshua was one of the chosen ones, one of the 70. And as we know, he was being groomed as the replacement for Moses, that when they finally reached the promised land, Moses was going to stay without crossing into Canaan, and Joshua would take on the leadership of the people, the new leader, groomed gradually over time. Moses did not get to quit. Notice that God's leaders never actually get to quit. They try. Moses met several times in his ministry to say, I can't do it. I'm not a good speaker. I don't want to. I can't talk to Pharaoh. This is not me. And every time God says, I'm going to give you help, go and do it. Now, let's look at the complaint in John, which is a much more subtle complaint. Remember that John is also one of the chosen ones. He's one of the chosen of the 12 disciples, but he's also one of Jesus' favorites. It appeared that Jesus had favorites, Peter, James, and John. They have just come down from the mountaintop, the 3 special guys. And as they're coming down from the mountaintop, Jesus says, I am going to be killed, and 3 days later I will rise from the dead. John has just heard that. Then we get to this story, and John says, Jesus, there is some person pretending to be one of us. He's exorcising demons. He's casting out demons in your name, but he's not one of our followers. He's not one of the chosen ones. And Jesus says, what is your problem with that? If he's not against us, He's for us. Anybody who's doing the work that we're doing are clearly working with the same healing and exercising spirit that we are. So why not have the help? Well, why would John be concerned about that after all? Does he really not recognize that there are a lot more people who need help out there? Now, I want to skip the middle of the reading because all of a sudden Jesus goes into this little, what we call a Markan sandwich, where he starts talking about don't harm the children, and then a lot of obtuse things about hands and feet. And it is about the abuse of children, and we're not talking about that today, so I'm just going to skip to the end now. Just forget about the hands and feet and going to hell part, and come back to being salted with fire. And he says we are all going to be salted with fire. And salt is a good thing. But if salt loses its saltiness, what good is it? So then he says, have salt in yourselves, and then be at peace with yourselves. Now, the truth is, no commentator knows exactly what Jesus meant about this salt thing. There are a few possibilities, but nobody can say definitively, and every commentator will tell you, I can't tell you exactly what he meant. It's called the most enigmatic saying ever of Jesus, the most puzzling thing he ever said. But what we do know is that he proclaims salt good, so to be salted with fire, maybe not a bad thing. And we know that salt had preserving and curative properties, that it cured meat, it also cured problems. It was necessary for survival, right? In a land where you sweat a lot, you need the sodium and salt to restore you. So Jesus says salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, no good. So have salt in yourselves and be at peace among yourselves. Now, John didn't complain about lacking salt within himself. John didn't complain about lacking peace with himself. He said, there's an outsider who's trying to do what I have been designated to do. And Jesus says, John, have salt in yourself. So to me, and this is my interpretation, salt is something good that preserves us, that cures our soul. We talk about the cure of souls, the healing and the restoration of our spiritual lives. And if we're somehow not tending to it, then we are losing our saltiness. So if John is worried about competing with some guy who's really good at casting out spirits, instead of doing the work that God has given him to do, just to bring about the kingdom of God, then he's losing his salt. He's losing what God has made him to do, what his holy core is, the thing that keeps his spiritual heart beating. Now, the interesting thing about all of these complaints is that nobody is actually complaining about the real problem, which is why God responds with some sort of delegation. The problem for the Israelites is not starvation. God has given them plenty of manna. They are not hungry. They have another problem. They've been wandering in the desert, we don't know, years, decades, when it's not exactly clear, maybe 40 years or maybe just a super long time. They're terrified. They don't know where they're going next. They don't know whether they will be set upon by another kingdom, another tribe of people, and they don't really trust this Moses guy, right? Why haven't we reached Canaan yet? You still haven't gotten us anywhere. So they're frightened. They're directionless. That's their real problem, not hunger. But because they can't put a voice to it, maybe they're afraid to call Moses out as the lousy leader they think him to be. They scream about not having meat. Have you ever seen somebody complain about something and you recognize that isn't the actual real problem? That's not what they're actually suffering from. It's something else. It's the same thing with Moses. He's always gotten help from God every time he's asked for help. But Moses' problem is that he's exhausted. This is the second time Moses has been advised to delegate. Remember, the first time his father-in-law Jethro says, you are way too busy judging every single issue, large and small, among this huge tribe of people. You need to delegate. You need 70 new judges. So they call upon 70 people to hear about the small problems. So he learns to delegate. This is the second time now in the book of Numbers, and God says, you need 70 other people to do the prophesying part of your work. So Moses lacks the ability to learn how to delegate, and God realizes that's his real problem. Not that the people are so difficult, but that Moses is exhausted, thinks he's the only one that can hear the voice of God and prophesy. And then God teaches him, takes care of the actual problem. You think you're the one and only. You think only you can do it. And as a result, you are exhausted. He strips him of the ego's need to be the one and the only Moses. Right? He takes care of that. And what is John's actual problem? His Lord, his Messiah, has just said, I'm going to die. And I'm going to come back in 3 days. Now remember, they had no idea what he meant by come back in 3 days. There was a vague concept of resurrection in Jewish culture, but nobody really understood crucified and then come out of a tomb 3 days later. That's an idea we're very familiar with. But John heard this news, and how would you feel if a parent or a beloved mentor said to you, I'm going to die, but don't worry, I'll be back after 3 days? You're going to be there on tenterhooks going, when are you going to die? How are you going to die? What's going to happen to me? How are we going to do this without you? John is afraid. That's the actual problem. John is afraid. And so when people are afraid, they batten down the hatches. They try to control everything, right? Let's get everything just the way we need it. And that guy over there is not one of us. Why is he doing exorcisms? Now, if you think about that, you would never stop somebody who was trying to cast an evil demon out of somebody else, would you? You'd say, wow, what an amazing, that's great that you can do that. Come on over and help us. That's because John's problem is not that this guy is casting out demons. John's problem is that he's afraid he's going to lose the Messiah. And what does Jesus say? First, let him do it. You're going to need more people to do this work. You have to learn how, when I'm gone, to delegate this to way more people. And second of all, check your salt. You have a problem here. You think you're the one and the only John, but you're one of many. And the church is just going to go on and on after you for centuries to come. And so John learns. Notice how God does that. We complain, and God responds by showing us how to delegate and giving a little message in there about how we need to heal ourselves. So, what this tells us is that when we find ourselves complaining, can we stop and say, is it actually the traffic on the freeway or the lousy internet or the coworker or the ungrateful child, or is it something else? Is it a profound loneliness, a fear of the unknown, not knowing where our lives are going, not knowing where our church is going, where our country is going, where Afghanistan is going? So all these uncertainties, and certainly in the time of COVID, we have been met with certainty, uncertainty upon uncertainty, and it's rattling. And so you find people having what we call in the industry COVID blow-ups. A COVID blow-up, just saying, I can't take it anymore, I quit. Quit my job. Lots of people have been quitting their jobs in COVID. I quit my marriage. I quit school. I quit sports team, whatever. Because there's a deep pain and fear in them that they can't look at. What if the whole world falls apart because of COVID? And they find something that is the source, they think, of the pain, and they want to end that. And every time in Scripture God says, nope, delegate. If you are in some place, turn to others and say, can you help with this situation? So we have to ask ourselves, what is the real source of pain? And then we have to ask ourselves, how do we preserve our souls in this time? How do we cure our souls? They require renewal.